So picture this. A patient gets wheeled into the ER, they're breathing way too fast, their stomach is killing them, and there's this weird sweet smell in the air. The monitor just blinks one word, high. It looks like a textbook case of diabetic ketoacidosis, or DKA. And your first thought, your gut instinct, is to go after that high sugar. But here's the twist. In this medical crisis, the obvious bad guy isn't the real threat at all.
Right there, that's your first clue. That fruity smell? It's ketones. It's the smell of the body's backup generators failing, putting out this toxic exhaust in a desperate, last-ditch effort to make fuel. It's an alarm bell you can actually smell, and it is screaming that something is deeply, metabolically wrong. The crisis is real, but the true danger? It's hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, you'd think so, right? But it's not that simple. Because while everyone is freaking out about that sky-high blood sugar number, that's just a distraction. The real story, the dangerous story of DKA, is what's happening underneath the surface. To really crack this case, we have to see DKA for what it is. It's an imposter. It shows up wearing a very convincing disguise, and our job is to see right through it.
And this, right here, is the big secret. The high sugar is just the mask. Underneath, you've got two silent killers working in the shadows. A catastrophic level of dehydration, and a complete meltdown of the body's essential minerals, its electrolytes. If you fix those two things, the sugar problem practically fixes itself.
So how in the world does the body get into such a mess? Let's play detective and follow the clues to really understand the anatomy of this crisis. The easiest way to think about it is like this. All the cells in your body are like little houses, and they need sugar for energy. Insulin is the key that unlocks the front door to let the sugar in. Well, in DKA, there is no key. The key is just gone. So you have all this sugar floating around in the bloodstream, tons of it, but the poor cells are literally starving to death. And that missing key sets off this catastrophic domino effect. First, with no key, the cells starve. The body panics and hits the emergency button, starting to burn fat for fuel. But this isn't a clean burn. This backup power plant is sputtering and spewing out toxic waste, those ketones we smelled earlier. Pretty soon, those ketones build up and turn the entire bloodstream acidic. And that, my friends, is metabolic acidosis. While all of that's happening, the sugar in the blood is acting like a giant sponge, just sucking water out of every tissue in the body. The kidneys are working overtime trying to dump all that sugar, but they end up flushing out insane amounts of water with it. We are talking 5 to 10 liters of fluid loss. That's up to 2.5 gallons. This patient isn't just sick, they're basically a walking desert. Okay, so the patient is here, the clock is ticking, there is no time to waste. We have to move, and we have to move now. This is the DKA first response. The absolute first thing you need is access. Big IVs, what we call big pipes to pump in fluids. While you're at it, you draw a whole bunch of lab tubes, a rainbow. But the single most important non-negotiable first step is fluids, a liter of saline running wide open. And notice what's not on this list yet. Insulin. Do not start the insulin. And here is exactly why you wait. We've got to talk about the sneakiest, scariest, and most counterintuitive part of this whole situation. We have to talk about potassium. I want you to let that sink in for a second. The first number you get back from the lab for your patient's potassium, it's a lie. It is a dangerous illusion. So here's the trick the body is playing on you. All that acid in the blood literally shoves potassium out of the cells and into the bloodstream. So when you run a blood test, the level looks normal, maybe even high, but it's a fake out. In reality, the patient's been peeing out potassium for days. Their body's total supply, their reserves, are completely empty. Because here's insulin's other job. It shoves potassium back into the cells. So if you give insulin before you know the real story, all that potassium that was floating in the blood suddenly rushes back inside the cells. The blood level will crash, and the heart, which needs potassium to beat right, can just stop. It's a fatal mistake. This chart right here, this is your playbook. These are the rules of the road. If the potassium is truly high, over 5.2, fine, you're safe to start insulin. If it's in that normal range, you start insulin and you give potassium at the same time to stay ahead of the inevitable drop. But if that number comes back low, under 3.3, you hit the brakes hard. You give potassium and only potassium until you get that number into a safer range. Okay, So you've flooded them with fluids, you've respected the great potassium lie. Now, and only now, are you ready for the main event. It's time to start the insulin and shut down that acid factory for good.
And the motto here is slow and steady. We even do this weird thing where we prime the tubing. We run some insulin through the plastic IV tubing first because insulin actually sticks to plastic. This coats the pipes and makes sure the patient gets every drop. Then it's just a low, continuous drip. The goal is to bring the sugar down gently because dropping it too fast can cause the brain to swell, which is another disaster we want to avoid.
So, how do we know when we've actually won? Well, it's not when the blood sugar looks normal. The real finish line, the true measure of success, is something called the anion gap. It's a number we calculate from the labs that tells us exactly how much acid is floating around. When that gap closes, gets back to normal, that's when we know the acid factory is officially out of business. But this leads to a really tricky situation. What happens when the blood sugar is looking pretty good? Let's say it's down to 200, but the anion gap is still wide open. That means the acid factory is still churning away. We have to keep the insulin going to fix the acid, but if we do, the sugar's going to crash. So, what do? You do something that sounds completely, totally wrong. You give the patient sugar. You literally switch their IV bag from normal saline to a new bag that has dextrose in it, which is just sugar. And this is the final brilliant move of DKA management. By giving the patient a little sugar through their IV, you prop up their blood sugar just enough so you can keep the insulin drip running. It lets you continue to fight the real enemy, the acid, without letting the sugar level bottom out. It's the ultimate metabolic balancing act. It's like refueling a plane while it's still flying. So let's just recap the whole thing. DKA is not a sugar problem. It's a three-headed monster, and your job is to take out those heads in the right order. First, dehydration. You drown them in fluids. Second, potassium. You respect the lie and manage it carefully. And third, and only then, acidosis. You use that slow, steady insulin drip to shut the factory down. This really is the whole ballgame. You have to forget the obsession with that high sugar number. It's not the main villain. It's about fixing the underlying physiology. Get that order of operations right, and you will pull your patient back from the brink of death, every single time. And really, it leaves you with this bigger question, doesn't it? In medicine, and maybe at a lot of things, we're trained to go after the biggest, loudest, most obvious problem. But as DKA teaches us, sometimes the loudest problem is just a distraction. The real skill, the life-saving skill, is knowing how to look for the quiet threat that's lurking just beneath the surface.